And here we go. I want to, before we do anything else, wish everyone a happy, healthy, productive, and fulfilling new year. And just to let you know that we have a guest here who I fortunately have the privilege of saying Mazal Tov to publicly. My sister-in-law is here with us, surprisingly enough. She just had two twin grandchildren born yesterday, so I'm surprised to see her here, surprised and happy. So Mazal Tov, a shout out from here, and we're going to give it one more minute for the rest of our people who are making their way in from the waiting room, and then I'm going to leave the rest of the admits to my co-host, who I'd also like to thank. John Rosen is in the background here dealing with all the technical stuff. And I'm happy to welcome you all to the first of what I hope will be a series of Regavim webinars to help everyone out there understand through Regavim's eyes what it is that's happening, what you're reading about in the news that isn't necessarily what it appears to be. We have a few examples this evening, which I think will illustrate what the fake news is, what the real news is, and why it makes a difference. Before we do that, I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to Regavim. We have some new friends with us here this evening who aren't as familiar with what it is that we do. And I hope that will help you understand why I have taken the liberty of explaining the news to you, and why I think I have insights that some of you may not have. Once you understand how we do our work and what our work is, I think it will give you enough confidence in the explanations of the news that I have to offer. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see some slides that I prepared, and we can, I hope you're seeing that. Yes. Okay. So Regavim was founded in 2006. The original name of the organization was the Israel Land Protection Trust. And that is really a very good description, but very long, about what it is that we do. We try to protect Israel's resources, particularly the most basic and most sought after, the most hotly contested and most scarce, perhaps, resource that we have, and that is the land itself. So everything we do begins from the land itself, which is why the name of the organization was changed at a certain point and became Regavim. That name will resonate with Israelis, I'm afraid, a lot more than it will resonate with English speakers. All of the early pioneering songs in the pre-state era actually referred to redeeming the land of Israel and building our homeland. Regev achar regev, one little mound of earth at a time. And so that was the name that was taken for the organization, because that is how we want to protect the land of Israel, one little unit of land at a time, really the smallest possible unit that you can identify as a unit of land. That is what we do. And the question is how we do that. And this is how we do that. We do everything starting from the ground up, and that means we base everything that we know on field work. We have field coordinators. We divide the country into regions. Each region has a field coordinator who's out in the field, on the ground, every day, seeing who's using that land resource, to what ends, by what permission, and what larger picture emerges from that when you take a step back and connect all the dots. We take exemplar cases of abuse of our land rights. We bring them all the way through the bureaucratic system, all the way up to the Supreme Court when necessary. We prosecute, we actually sue the government of Israel for failing to protect our national lands, and for failing to enforce the law, and for failing to, I would say, protect a vision that will ensure a healthy, thriving Jewish homeland for generations to come. This is how we do our work, aside from being out in the field, photographing, either with regular cameras. We use drones. We take all of those images back to the office. We map them all out on GIS with GIS coordinates, a global information system which gives exact coordinates, so we can see who's in charge of every single piece of land that we are investigating, what the status of the land is, both legally and under the system of law that applies in that area, and then we work from there. So we collect all of this information. We essentially crunch the numbers. We analyze the data. We formulate a bigger picture, and then we recommend solutions for when there are black holes of legislation or enforcement. These are just some of the covers of some of our more recent reports. And as you will see, as we get further into it, these reports are really setting the agenda for Israel's policy in ways that we could not have imagined when the organization was founded in 2006. We are recognized essentially as the experts on the Negev, and we will be discussing the Negev later on in this evening's presentation. And many of the reports that you see here are about the Negev. We are also extremely active in Judea and Samaria. We are also recognized as experts throughout the country in all things having to do with the legislation and law regarding construction. So we're going to see a few examples of how we work and how we have attained that status and what still needs to be done. So the three topics that we're going to discuss this evening are, the first one is under duress. I have to admit that I did not volunteer to talk about judicial reform this evening, but I was given no choice. There were many, many people who, and I think particularly those who are now in the United States, who are seeing for the first time demonstrations and protests that they cannot understand. And so I've been asked to briefly discuss judicial reform, Regavim's place in it, and what it is that you should know in order to be able to understand the headlines. I'm going to talk about it very briefly. The second topic is a classic example of fake news, of news that you have seen and probably not understood. We call it the most recent skirmish in the battle for Area C. And I can give you any number of examples of those. I'll give you a couple of small examples of what we see happening in Judea and Samaria and what it is that's reported and why that is untrue. And the third will be a small example of the headlines that are completely misleading regarding what's happening down in the Negev. So we're going to dive right in. I will tell you that I'm hoping to speak for not more than 25 minutes to cover these three topics and show you the examples. And then we're going to open to questions. If you have questions about any of the things that I say during the course of the presentation, I'd ask you to put them in the chat. John Rosen, who's behind the scenes here, will be collecting those questions, curating them for me so that I can address them in the Q&A portion of tonight's webinar. And if there are questions that we don't get to, I will certainly address them by direct email. The beauty of registering for a webinar is that I now have your email and can respond directly. And John, I hope you'll put in the chat my direct email so that anyone who has questions, wants more information, can certainly just reach out to me directly. That is the point of this webinar. So we're going to jump right in. Tonight's judicial reform topic is, I'm not going to explain to you all of the things that the government is proposing. I'm not going to explain to you all of the things that the opposition is opposing. I certainly am not going to offer a list of what the opposition is proposing in a positive way, because there is nothing. But I will say this. The issue of judicial reform is complex. It is not new. And there are many aspects of it. number one is the content, and number two is the form through which that reform is being proposed. I think many people in Israel are more concerned, are really concerned about the method of passing judicial reform and not necessarily about the substance of the judicial reforms that have been proposed. But I'd like to take a step back and explain to you why Regavim is involved in judicial reform at all. Because if we were talking about land resources and about protecting our national lands, where does judicial reform fit in? So I have to tell you, without any undue modesty, because this is not the place for that, the entire issue of judicial reform, the movement for judicial reform that was taken up by a person who is now a member of Knesset and head of the Knesset Judiciary Committee, MK Simcha Rothman, it all began when he read the report, the cover of which you see on your screen now. This report, called Measure for Measure, it is an index, literally an index of judicial bias. It's called judicial parity, but the truth is that when we began measuring judicial parity, we ended up discovering tremendous judicial bias. This happened because, as I mentioned, Regavim works in the courts. We are a law-based organization. We prosecute cases in order to create precedent and to encourage, empower, and sometimes force the government to do its job. And in the course of doing that, we had a feeling that, really a feeling that there was something extremely uneven about the court's treatment of petitions submitted by left-wing organizations, pro-Arab organizations, foreign-funded organizations, as opposed to petitions that were submitted by right-wing organizations, Zionist organizations, such as Regavim. And after years of bumping up against this feeling of bias, we decided that we should actually check if there's real judicial bias. We did this in a series of every 3 years we checked this. So it started out in 2013. Our first report came out actually in 2011. It was much smaller. Then in 2013, a full report, again in 2015, and finally 2018. When Simcha Rothman saw this report, he said, "Oh my goodness, we have a problem, and this has to be addressed before anything else can change for the better in this country." And he founded his movement for judicial reform called the Meshilut movement, which means governance. And I'll just show you one page that summarizes some of these findings that were published in this Measure for Measure study. So we decided to check objective parameters to see if our gut feeling of bias was actually just a gut feeling, was some sort of chip on our shoulder, or there was actually something measurable about it. But rather than checking the outcomes of Supreme Court petitions, which is unfair because perhaps we just were barking up the wrong tree and we were submitting petitions that had no chance of winning or were unjustified, we decided instead to investigate objective parameters that influenced how the outcomes would be determined. So, for example, we checked how many days the government was given to respond to a petition submitted by us or submitted by the left. And we found that there was a measurable, very significant, actually, difference, and that when it came to, the first graph is the other way around. How much time was the government given to, how much time was the respondent given to present arguments? And we found a difference, a significant difference. But the most significant differences, for example, the graph on the lower left, number of days till the first hearing, petitions from the right were dragged around the courts for a year before they were given a hearing, significantly longer than petitions from the left. But look at the next box, Order Nisi issued. Massive difference. Interim orders, top middle. Interim orders essentially is the way that the court will order the situation on the ground to be frozen until a verdict is reached. So when we say an Arab is building illegally and the government hasn't done anything about it and it has to be stopped, in 13% of the time, the court issued an interim order freezing the situation on the ground so that it would not progress to completion while the case was in court. But in 84% of the cases where left-wing organizations petitioned against Jewish construction, interim orders were issued by the court immediately. That is a massive difference. The next box over, Chief Justice presided. That lends a certain weight and creates precedent that was allowed to the left-wing petitions in 58% of their petitions filed, and only 21% of petitions filed by right-wing organizations. Over and over again, we found all of these objective parameters. There was a clear bias in that determined better chances for a positive outcome for petitions filed by the left as opposed to petitions filed by the right. And we began to understand that it didn't matter so much what government was elected, what laws were passed, what military orders were issued, if the court simply did whatever it wanted and essentially rigged the match before the game began, with all of these objective parameters tilting so favorably for the left. So when we began to see over and over all of these objective parameters and all of this bias that was determining the outcomes before the cases even were heard, we began to complain about it. And the Supreme Court itself actually responded, which is extremely rare, to our findings and addressed some of our more serious charges of bias here. Simcha Rothman established his movement, and the rest essentially is history. So yes, Regavim is in favor of judicial reform. We have been calling for judicial reform since the day Regavim was established. We believe that the people elect a government that reflects its outlook in terms of our national rights and our national interests, and that should be expressed in the outcomes on the ground, and the government should be able to express these values in policy. And this unelected, self-appointed Supreme Court that has taken all sorts of powers out of the hands of the legislature should be restored to its original appropriate size. That is what I'll say about judicial reform. I would urge you all, anyone who's more interested in learning more about what the judicial reform is, what the precise recommendations of the government are, what the legislation is that they are proposing, all of these things. We have on our website a resource page. Go onto our website, regavim.org, and at the very top, you'll see under policy papers, click on judicial reform resource page, and it will give you enough reading for a month. So anything that you want to know more about, I encourage you to look there. But now I'm going to move on to our next topic, because I think this really is a classic. I'm going to show you now a video clip that was seen by 18.3 million people on TikTok. This video went viral. It was posted by the Al-Quds network. As you see, the back of it, what most people don't notice, and this is the freeze frame of where it starts, the guy whose back is to the camera here is wearing a shirt with the emblem of an organization that the words underneath in Arabic say, redeeming the land through agriculture. That is illegal agricultural land seizure in areas under Israeli jurisdiction. I'm not going to give you a whole lesson now about the jurisdictional issues in Judea and Samaria. Suffice it to say that Area C, the area under full Israeli jurisdiction, is a battleground. And many of the things that you see, which are hard to understand, are simply battle tactics. They have moved away from using, well, unfortunately, not far enough away from using violence, but one of the more effective methods of annexing and creating a de facto Palestinian state in all of Judea and Samaria is through this quiet annexation of the territory. So I'm going to show you now this video clip. It's in Arabic. I will explain to you what the narrator is saying afterwards. But have a look at this video. It's about 90 seconds, maybe a little bit longer. And then we'll talk about what 18.3 million viewers have seen, what they have been told, and then we're going to talk about what the truth of this story is. Okay. The sound seems to be off. I do not know why. Well, what you're seeing here, there's a lot of shouting in the background, and I'm trying to figure out why it's not making any noise. But it's all the same because it's a lot of shouting in Arabic. You see soldiers, you see them pouring cement into a well, and you see a lot of Arab people shouting. And then this guy says, well, this was one of our wells, and we have fields here, and the occupation forces are trying to dispossess us of our land by drying us out. If we don't have water, we can't grow crops, and this is how they're trying to get us to leave. Now, I don't know if you just noticed it. Hold on a minute. We'll go back a little. See this guy? See what he has in his hand? That's a video camera. And he's not the one taking this video, which means that there were several people at the scene right there when the civil administration came and poured cement in this well, or whatever it was, taking pictures. They knew it was coming, and they were there to document it. And then they put it up on social media, and they said, this is a crime against humanity because Israel is depriving us of water and depriving us of our livelihood and trying to get us to leave our land by drying us up, right? Now, what's the real story? What's the story that they haven't told you here? The truth is, yes, the civil administration, that is the arm of the Israeli military responsible for, sorry, I'll go back again. That is the arm of the military responsible for enforcing the law in Judea and Samaria, in the part of Judea and Samaria under Israeli jurisdiction, Area C, did in fact come to this place and pour cement in a water hole. What they haven't told you is that they received warnings that what they were doing was not only illegal, but was also incredibly environmentally unsafe, and they were depriving water by drilling these wells. There are 4 of them. They're depriving water not only to the Jewish communities in Area C, but to the Arab communities in Area C and the Arab communities in areas A and B under Palestinian Authority control. Because what you have in front of you, this picture, sorry about that, what you have is a violation of the Oslo Accords. Very, very specifically, the Oslo Accords have a whole separate chapter on water sources and water supply. There's a joint committee through which water allocation is created. The Oslo framework was very, very specific, water and sewage. Israel provides water not only to the communities under its own jurisdiction, but provides all the water all through Judea and Samaria from the mountain aquifer. And these people that you saw here shouting at the soldiers dug illegal wells, drilled right into the mountain aquifer, which was destroying the water supply, disrupting the water supply to all of the communities in Judea and Samaria, but also polluting the entire water system. Because when you drill a pirate well, you salinate the water, you corrupt the water source, you disrupt the entire water table. Now, the Palestinian Authority signed the Oslo Agreement, and the state of Israel gave a commitment to supply a certain amount of water and to keep that system for application for additional water open and active, and it has done so. So today, the state of Israel provides double, 200% of the water that it committed to provide under the Oslo framework. But it provides it at the price, at the cost that it agreed to charge in 1995 when it signed this agreement. So Jewish businessmen and all that, not very clever. What can I say? We are providing double the amount of water that we committed to give the Palestinian Authority. We are providing it at the originally agreed upon unadjusted price from 1995. And if the Palestinians at any point, the Palestinian Authority feels that they need more water for any of their places under their jurisdiction, they know exactly how to get it. They apply to the Joint Committee and they get more water. These people are simply stealing water, destroying the entire water system for everyone. So the civil administration came, warned them that they should discontinue drilling. They did not do so. They came and they sealed up these wells. So what you see, 18.3 million people saw was the terrible occupation depriving people of water. What you really saw was pirate drilling, total disregard for the environment, complete violation of international treaties, and finally, when Israel's back was against the wall, finally, some law enforcement. But that didn't go over very well with the 18.3 million viewers who saw it on the Al-Quds Network TikTok channel. So this is a classic example of what you see is not what you get. Really, what you see and how that is explained in the international media requires understanding a whole lot more of the background, which is why I'm here. But anyone who's interested in learning more about how Palestinian villages and towns in areas A, B, and C get their water, who supplies it, under what conditions, and what are the terms of that agreement, all of that is open information. All of that is available. I can send anybody who wants links to the Oslo Accords, to the ongoing documentation from the Joint Committee. All of this is matter of public record, but you won't see any of that in the news because it doesn't fit the narrative. We have the same thing, over and over again. This, by the way, you can see this full report on our website. It's a beauty. I love it. It's about 3 pages long, and it reflects one of the great mythbuster Supreme Court decisions of the last decade. What you will hear about in the news over and over again is Masafar Yatta. There's an international campaign to save Masafar Yatta. Masafar Yatta is a collection of illegal, quote unquote, villages. They're actually clusters of illegal construction inside an IDF training ground in the South Hebron area. The Palestinian Authority paid for, encouraged, and used European funding and support to create villages inside an active IDF training ground. And then the people who were living there sued the state of Israel, saying that these were their ancient villages and they had every right to be there. So the Supreme Court dragged its feet for almost 10 years, but we did the very, very simple thing. We said, okay, ancient villages, let's have a look at what they looked like in not so ancient history. And we did this for each of the 16 quote unquote villages of Masafar Yatta. This is what this village looked like in 1945. Not a thriving metropolis, not a single structure, absolutely nothing there. This was considered state land under the Ottoman Empire. It was considered state land under the British Mandate. It was considered state land under the Jordanian occupation. And it is state land under the Israeli regime. And why is that? Because it was completely barren, uninhabited and virtually uninhabitable, considered dead. It's wasteland. and no one ever lived there. That is why the IDF used it for live fire training practice, live fire navigation, Air Force practice, all sorts of very dangerous things. This is what it looked like. We often get this this claim that, oh, you know, the Israelis chased them out, so we were there in the past. But we went back to 1945, and you have here, for some reason, I'm not being able to see this. Yes, this is what it looked like in 1967, completely empty. And this is what it looked like in 1981, completely empty. The things that you see here are part of, this was right after it became a military training ground. So what you see here is all sorts of formations that they use for training, for practice. This is what it looked like in 2008. Not a thriving metropolis then either, but the first few attempts to build tents were already visible on the ground. This is what it looks like now. This is the result of massive European Union involvement. They've paid and built schools here, paved roads. They support these people and called it a village, gave it a name, gave it a history. You look this up on Wikipedia, you'll see its ancient history and arts and culture, et cetera, et cetera. And these people weren't there 15 years ago. They weren't even there 10 years ago. And it's all fake news. We did this for every one of the villages, quote unquote, in Masafar Yatta. We do it all over the place. We do it in the Negev as well. And that's our next topic. But I would just remind you, that all of this is available on our website. You can see the entire pictorial history of the myth of Masafar Yatta, any of these reports, and all 165 slides for each of these covering all of the villages in Masafar Yatta are there. And if you have any specific questions, you can send them. But we see the exact same phenomenon. The exact same phenomenon. I'm going the wrong way again. Don't get dizzy. Yes. So the exact same phenomenon has happened throughout the Negev. Again, I remind you that the Negev is within Little Israel, within the Green Line, part of 1948 Israel. The Bedouin who live in the Negev are citizens of the state of Israel. And the myth of historic Bedouin villages has been for many years the basis for their claims of ownership of massive portions of land throughout the Negev, beyond all proportion. Bedouin are currently squatting on an area of the Negev that is bigger than Israel's 10 largest cities combined. And it is a very small number of people, something around 82,000 people who are covering an area illegally and claiming ownership based on these historic Bedouin villages. Well, the good news is that very recently, we published this report. The full English report version will be coming out hopefully just around Sukkot. You can read the executive summary on our website, or the full Hebrew version if you're up to that. But hopefully the English version will come out right around Sukkot. Hopefully I will get to it because it's on my plate. But recently we had a judgment that took over a decade to get, and it is finally beginning to unravel the fake news, the myth, the false narrative of historic Bedouin villages in the Negev. And this is what the most recent court case circled around. What you're looking at here is a squatters camp called El Zarnug. 2 weeks ago, the Beersheba District Court actually threw these claimants out. It took them over a decade to figure out that the state of Israel was not going to do what needed to be done. The Abu Qidr tribe had taken over this large chunk of land here. Everything that you see in this picture is illegal construction, except in the foreground, it's a school built by the state of Israel for this illegal encampment on privately owned Jewish land. bizarre, yes. The owners of this land lost their land first to squatters and second to the state of Israel catering to the squatters. We finally won a judgment, a massive judgment 2 weeks ago, where the judge said, you know, if the state wants to waive its own proprietary rights to land, that's one thing. But waiving private ownership without any compensation, without any conversation, that's robbery. And the court ordered the state to demolish these illegal structures and to relocate the people who are living here. After over a decade of legal battles, the rightful Jewish owners will finally have, hopefully, have their property restored to them. This is a landmark case, and we are very, very excited about it. I hope that you will all read more about how this whole thing played out over time and how we think it's going to impact the face of the Negev moving forward. All of the information is available on our website. And again, the virtual reality report should be coming out just around in just a couple of weeks when I finish the final edits. We took apart, we analyzed the claims of indigenous historic Bedouin villages throughout the Negev and proved without a shadow of a doubt that none of them have more of a leg to stand on than this El Zarnug, which you're looking at right in front of you. But what are we really facing here? We're not talking about shacks and Bedouin tents. We're talking about these kinds of structures. These are being built on other people's property. It's not something that comes up overnight, some Bedouin who strolls out into the wilderness and puts up a tent. It's the state of Israel conscientiously, studiously, looking the other way and allowing these massive palatial structures to go up on land that belongs to someone else, either to all of us together as the Jewish people, because it is state land, or on someone's private property for which they paid, to which they are registered owners. So we're making progress with all of that. But what you will see in the news instead is the state of Israel is here. We've already started to see it. Headlines about this court case. The state of Israel is going to dispossess hundreds of Bedouin from their ancestral lands in the Negev to make way for a Jewish settler. Now, the owners of this are the furthest thing from settlers that there are. They are fourth generation Israelis. They are not settling someone else's land. They are the registered owners of this land. And the news that you will see will be simply a false narrative. But the interesting thing about it, again, is that this is within Little Israel, within 1948 Israel. And now Jews who own land in the Negev are settlers too. So you can chew on that yourselves for a little while. But that brings me more or less to the three fake news topics that I think are important for you to get a grasp of how the images or the headlines that you see and hear in the news really have a very, very different story behind them when you understand the background and have the facts. We are here to provide those facts. Our website is really a treasure of information. It's got the full legal library. If you read Hebrew, you can read every single one of our court cases. You can see all of the court decisions in every one of the cases. We translate the most important things, so you can follow on the news there. We also have a monthly newsletter that updates you on our current cases, on new petitions, on wins and losses, essentially, on all sorts of activity that we are doing in all of these fields and more. And we have active update groups on social media, WhatsApp. We're very active on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. You name it, they're out there. The only thing we don't use is homing pigeons at the moment, but we'll probably get there too. And there are many things that you, wherever you are sitting, can do to help spread the truth. One of them is to avail yourselves of the data, the facts, and the research that we make available to the public in any of those platforms, and to share it. Another thing is, for those of you who are in Israel or visit Israel, when you see something that looks out of place, it probably is. So I would recommend on our websites and on our social media, there's always a way to contact us. Just say, somebody's building something along the side of Route 60. I was traveling on my way to visit a vineyard, and I see something weird. What's going on there? We send a field coordinator out to investigate, and we have found astounding things just by some tip-off from someone who happened to be driving by. So if you see something, say something. And of course, donate. Keeping us in the battle, allowing us to continue to do what we do is, I think, really the best way, and I'm not at all biased, but really the best way to have somebody keeping an eye on all of this. Because the government is not doing it, and we're not very popular with the government. We are completely donation-based. We have no other sources of funding other than people like you and me. So that's what keeps us running. Every time we go to the Supreme Court, it costs us something in the area of 35,000 shekel. And we are there all the time. And all of our research and all of our field work and all of our equipment and all of our documentation isn't free. So if you can donate, or if you know of someone who might be able to, that will be very helpful. It's a very, very simple thing to do. Also, from our website, you can just click on the donate button and it will take you straight to an online donations page or give you other options. And a very important thing is to organize and host events in your communities or even online for people that you know. Invite them, or when the link to this webinar goes up and you think there were people who would benefit from hearing the truth about some of these headlines, share the link with them. Invite them to educate themselves and ask them if they want more information. I'm always available to send more. For those of you who are in Israel, writing letters, attending court hearings is sometimes an option. Writing letters to the editor, commenting or reposting important information on your own platforms among your friends, colleagues, family. Those are all important things that you can do to help. Now I'm going to go over to questions and answers, and I'm going to see what John has sent me here. So we've got some questions. The New Israel Fund finances the protests. How can such an organization, cooperating with B'Tselem and Breaking the Silence and other hostile NGOs, have such a bad influence in public? That's a really nice question. That was a setup question. I didn't pay anyone to ask that question. But here's the answer. It's really easy to sell something to someone who is eager to buy it before you even started. Most of the public out there is eager to buy the false headlines and the fake news and the narratives that make Israel look bad. They, as a matter of fact, pay people to create these narratives, to stage some of these confrontations, to create situations of conflict and confrontation. I cannot count the number of times in a week that I get a call or an email from a foreign journalist from the most far-flung corners of the earth asking me to discuss only one topic. There's only one topic they're interested in: settler violence. That's all they want. And why is that? Because the European Union has paid Breaking the Silence 1 million shekel. And this is a matter of public record. They paid them 1 million euros to create a campaign about settler violence. They did this a couple of years ago. And ever since that time, nothing else makes the news. Some of these incidents are staged. Some of them are just plain fake. Some of them, unfortunately, are responses to provocations where people are actually provoked into violent confrontation. And some of them are just plain out settler violence. Yes, I will not deny that there is such a thing. The difference being, of course, that the state of Israel, the Jewish people, the educators, the parents, the schools, the education system, all tries to stamp it out, to discourage, to educate away from violence. Whereas the Palestinian Authority does precisely the opposite. Not only does it pay people to carry out acts of violence, terrorism, and murder, it encourages all children, it inculcates them with an ideology of hatred and violence from the very earliest ages on up. So we're working at cross purposes here. And the question of settler violence is a very, very convenient way to help propel this delegitimization campaign. How can they have so much influence? It's easy. They're selling something that people already wanted to buy and have paid them to create. What is an order nisi? That's for okay. Robert Meyer answered that question in the chat. Thank you, Robert. We need to move a little faster. Hollywood, who's prepped the Arab camera crews? Yes, there are people who are paid to create these confrontations. Has Israel agreed to let the EU fund all this illegal construction? Obviously, no one asked Israel to agree to allow the European Union to break the law. They behave towards the state of Israel as if we were not a state, not a democracy, not a quote unquote ally, not anyone that should be respected. And we're allowing them to treat us that way. So part of our problem is forcing the government of Israel to stand up for our rights. A very large part of what we do is trying to help the government grow a backbone. That's part of it. The story of the latest winning court was a judge in Beersheba. What about the judges in the judiciary in Jerusalem? We have a lot of work to do. That's my answer to that one. Do we continue to buy Israel bonds? Even though, yes, absolutely. Israel bonds are used to build roads and bring high-speed internet to peripheral communities and feed children and improve their after-school activities in peripheral towns and lots of other very, very important things. Yes, all of those things are important, and that is has always been a way for the Jewish people as a whole to support the Zionist project here in the land of Israel. So absolutely. But at the same time, if I had bonds for Regavim to sell you, I would do that, because I think that that is a complementary method of ensuring a strong Jewish homeland for this generation and the next. John, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Oh, I have one more slide here. Sorry. This slide, if you have a phone handy with a scanner, you can scan. One will take you straight to our website. The other will take you to our donations page. Both of those are very nice places to visit. And you can reach one through the other, etc. You can also always reach me. See at the bottom of the page, there's Regavim's website address, our Facebook address, our Twitter address. If you would like to copy off of your screen or contact me directly, you can always contact me at Naomi, Naomi, at regavim.org. And I will help direct you to source material or answer any specific questions, provide whatever materials I can get my hands on, and some that I can't. And I'm happy to entertain any of your questions. I urge you to invite, we will be notifying when we send out the link for the recording. Here we will be asking if you're interested in signing up for our newsletter to get monthly updates. We will not abuse your email. Simply once a month, send you an email with current activities. But you don't have to wait to get an email from us to do that. Simply jump onto the website. At the very bottom of the homepage is a sign up for our newsletter, or contact me directly if you need further instruction. I thank you all for joining us, and I hope that you will come when we publicize the next Behind the Headlines. There will be other headlines that need explaining, there always are, and that you invite others to educate themselves, to come and hear a little bit of truth about some of these issues that they'll be reading about in the newspaper, certainly in the weeks to come. Thank you all, and Chatima Tova. May we all be inscribed for a year of peace, health, and fulfillment. Thank you again.